I remember the chandeliers first. They hung like frozen fire above the ballroom, dripping golden light onto tables covered with roses and silk. The air smelled of champagne and expensive perfume, the kind of scent that clung to wealth that was not mine, at least not in their eyes. I sat alone near the back, watching my son Daniel laugh among his new in-laws. His tuxedo was sharp, his smile wider than I had seen in years. He looked like he belonged to their world now, not mine. I could feel people glancing at me, some with pity, others with quiet disdain. To them, I was the struggling father who had done his best, but never quite succeeded. That was the role I had allowed them to believe. Truth was different. But truth has a way of becoming irrelevant when appearances scream louder. Daniel hadn't asked me to contribute a dime to this wedding. Not for the venue, not for the catering, not for Emily's diamond-studded gown. Perhaps he thought I couldn't. Perhaps Emily made sure he thought that. I stayed quiet. Silence has power, especially when people underestimate you. As the ceremony unfolded, I kept my face neutral, but inside I churned. Every dollar they spent tonight could have been outmatched 10 times over by what I held in accounts no one here knew about. I had built my empire silently, stocks, properties, offshore holdings, but I never flaunted it. Not even to Daniel. Maybe that was my mistake. Emily, his bride, sparkled like a trophy. Beautiful, yes, but her eyes, cold, calculating. The way she held Daniel's arm felt less like love and more like possession. I knew that look. I had seen it in business partners who smiled until they could stab you in the back. I sipped my wine, bitter in taste, though expensive in brand. Around me, guests raised their glasses and clapped as Daniel and Emily shared their first dance. My heart should have been proud, but it burned. It instead. Pride doesn't survive long when your own child treats you like a shadow. Then the moment came. The band quieted, the spotlight shifted, and Daniel took the microphone. His voice carried across the ballroom with a confidence that made me ache. "Tonight," he said, "I want to thank everyone who made this possible. My beautiful wife, her amazing family, and of course, all of you." Laughter and cheers erupted. Then his eyes flicked to me, sharp, deliberate. And to my father, who may not have had much money to his name, but always gave me, well, what he could. The room chuckled softly, some with sympathy, others with mockery. My chest tightened, but he wasn't finished. Daniel smirked, that same arrogant smirk that Emily seemed to encourage in him. "You know, growing up, I used to dream of nights like this, and I'd wonder if my dad could ever give me a wedding like this one. Guess not. Turns out he's always been kind of broke." The laughter this time was louder, crueler, echoing against my skull. I froze. My hand gripped the stem of my glass until it threatened to snap. My son, my flesh and blood, was parading me as a failure in front of everyone. Emily clapped her delicate hands, laughing into his shoulder, her diamond ring catching the light. Around me, whispers fluttered like knives, but I didn't move. I didn't shout. I didn't break. I just smiled, faintly, hiding the inferno inside. "You think I'm broke, son?" I thought. "You have no idea what's coming." The laughter still rang in my ears long after Daniel stepped down from the stage. My son's words had left a stain on me, one that no suit or tie could cover. I sat there, every muscle stiff, as if I had turned into stone. People around me leaned closer to each other, their whispers crawling across the tablecloths like insects. Broke. That was the word he chose. Not father, not mentor, not even man. Just broke. My wine glass trembled slightly in my hand, and I had to set it down before I shattered it. My eyes scanned the room, the sneers, the pity, the forced smiles. Every glance cut deeper. The humiliation wasn't just in Daniel's words. It was in the way everyone seemed to suddenly see me as small. Emily leaned into Daniel's ear, her red lips brushing against his cheek. I couldn't hear her words, but I saw the result. His grin widened, his chest puffed out, as though her whispers had fueled his cruelty. I knew that smile. It wasn't joy, it was arrogance, sharpened by her approval. One of her relatives, a tall man with a watch worth more than most cars, laughed loud enough for me to hear. "Guess the old man won't be leaving much behind, huh?" Daniel chuckled along. Emily's laugh joined his, crystalline and venomous. That was the dagger. Not just the insult, but the mockery, the public stripping of my dignity. I rose from my chair slowly, making sure not to stumble. Every eye followed me, expecting perhaps an outburst, some pathetic attempt at defending myself. But no, I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I walked toward the bar, each step deliberate, and ordered another drink. The bartender poured silently, his eyes darting toward me with something between sympathy and fear. I wondered which one hurt more. I didn't drink immediately. Instead, I stared into the amber liquid, watching it ripple under the ballroom's golden lights. In that reflection, I saw my son, his tuxedo perfect, his smile wide, his arm locked with Emily's. And I saw myself, a shadow at the edge of his grand performance. Inside me, something hardened. A memory surfaced. Daniel as a boy, tugging on my sleeve, asking if I could buy him ice cream. I had worked overtime that week, exhausted, but I had said yes. I always said yes. I had given him everything he asked for, even when it broke me, and now, in front of strangers, he broke me again. "Enjoying yourself, Mr. Bennett?" A voice purred beside me. It was Emily, her perfume thick, her smile dripping with mockery. "I hope you don't mind Daniel's little joke. He does have a sense of humor." Her eyes glimmered, cold, sharp. That wasn't humor. That was cruelty, and she wanted me to know she enjoyed it. I forced a polite smile. "Oh, I don't mind. Jokes have a way of revealing more than people intend." She tilted her head, studying me as if trying to measure how much fight was left in me. Then, with a smirk, she turned and glided back to Daniel, whispering something that made him laugh again. But she had revealed something, too. She wasn't just complicit. She was the architect. As the night dragged on, I kept quiet. My silence was mistaken for weakness, but inside, plans began to stir. Their laughter was still ringing in my ears, but it no longer stung. It fueled me. When Daniel kissed Emily at the end of the dance floor, I clenched my jaw and looked away. In that moment I knew I would not forget this night, and neither would they. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and whispered to myself, "They wanted a broke father. They will get one, but not in the way they imagine." When I returned home from the wedding that night, the silence of my house felt heavier than ever. The laughter and mockery from that ballroom still clung to me, like a foul stench I couldn't wash away. I sat in my leather armchair, staring at the darkened fireplace. My fingers traced the rim of the empty glass in my hand, but I wasn't drinking anymore. I was thinking, rewinding. Every insult, every whisper, every smirk replayed in my mind. And in each memory, Emily's shadow lingered just behind Daniel. It wasn't just Daniel humiliating me. No, I could see her fingerprints all over it. Daniel had once been a kind boy, easily moved, too eager to please. I remembered him in his teenage years, following me around the garage, asking endless questions about life, about work. He used to look at me as if I was the strongest man alive. But then Emily arrived. From the very first dinner I had with her, I sensed the chill. She had charm, yes, perfect smiles, gracious words. But her eyes betrayed her. They never softened. They calculated. Even when she held Daniel's hand across the table, she didn't look at him with affection, but with possession, as though she had claimed her prize and wouldn't let anyone take it, least of all me. At the wedding, her whispers had controlled him, fueling his arrogance, sharpening his tongue. Tonight, alone in my quiet house, I finally admitted the truth to myself. My son had become her puppet, and the strings were greed, pride, and her poisonous approval. I leaned back, closing my eyes, but memories pushed their way in. The time Daniel snapped at me for giving him cheap cufflinks, though they were engraved with his initials. The night he refused to visit his sick mother in the hospital until Emily approved. The way Emily once smiled when Daniel told me, "You'll understand when you have real money, Dad." That was years ago. They had been boiteux, building this wall of contempt together for far longer than I wanted to admit. I opened my eyes and muttered, "So this is what family becomes." The words sounded bitter even to me. For a moment I considered confronting Daniel directly, tearing the mask away from his wife's face, forcing him to see what she truly was. But then I stopped myself. If he couldn't see it by now, he never would. And shouting would only confirm what they already believed, that I was desperate, weak, and powerless. No. If I was to fight back, I needed patience, calculation, a kind of revenge they could never predict. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight. Its sound echoed through the house, deep and solemn. I sat forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and whispered into the emptiness, "They think I am broke. Let them keep thinking it." A strange calm settled over me. For the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel humiliated. I felt focused. My fortune was still untouched, unseen, unknown. They had laughed at the ghost of a man, not the truth of me. And that truth, I realized, could become my greatest weapon. I stood, walked to my study, and pulled out an old folder from the locked drawer. Inside were deeds, account numbers, investment certificates, the empire I had built in silence, my fortune, my legacy. I ran my hand across the papers, then closed the folder slowly. One day, they will regret ever calling me broke. Just then my phone buzzed. A new message lit up the screen. It was from an unknown number, but I didn't need to guess. It was Emily. "We'll never have to depend on you. Daniel and I will make our own future. Don't bother trying to impress us." I stared at the words, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face. She had no idea she had just lit the fuse. Emily's message still glowed on the screen, its venom seeping into the quiet of my study. "We'll never have to depend on you." I read it 3 times before locking my phone and sliding it aside. She thought I was chasing their approval. She thought I was trying to impress them. No. What I wanted was respect. What I wanted was loyalty. And now what I craved was revenge. I turned to the folder spread across my desk. Inside lay the truth I had guarded for decades, the empire no one believed I possessed. The first paper I pulled free was a deed, my lakefront property in Vermont, bought under a holding company years ago, worth over $6 million now. Another folder revealed ownership of an office block in Chicago, fully rented, cash flowing like a steady river. There were shares, too, blue-chip stocks that had quietly multiplied over time, bonds maturing with interest most men would never see. And then, the offshore account. Numbers so staggering they almost mocked me for ever allowing myself to feel small at that wedding. Hundreds of millions. All mine. All hidden. As I ran my hand across the papers, I felt a rush of bitter irony. My son, who had mocked me in front of strangers, had no idea his father was wealthier than the entire ballroom combined. Emily, with her diamond smile and sharpened tongue, thought she had married into power. But she was sitting in shadows, blind to the truth. I leaned back in my chair and let the thought simmer. Silence is wealth's greatest shield. For years, I had chosen not to flaunt it. After my wife Margaret passed away, money lost its shine. I invested quietly, managed carefully, and never spoke of it. I wanted Daniel to build his own life, not wait for mine to fund it. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps that silence had planted the very arrogance that now poisoned him. But silence can be more than a shield. It can be a weapon. If they saw me as broke, then so be it. I would let them continue to believe it. Their greed would grow, unchecked, until it consumed them. And when the time was right, I would turn my silence into a blade sharp enough to cut through both their pride and their marriage. My phone buzzed again, this time from Michael Carter, my attorney of 20 years, a loyal man, one of the few who knew pieces of my truth. Richard, just a reminder, the trust paperwork is ready whenever you want to finalize. I typed back slowly. Not yet, but soon. We may need to make some adjustments. I pictured his brow furrowing at the ellipsis. Michael always knew when I was planning something, and this time I was planning everything. I closed the folder, slid it back into the drawer, and locked it tight. Then I stood and walked toward the large mirror across the room. My reflection stared back, an aging man in a dark suit, silver hair falling across his forehead. A man they had mocked as broke. Broke, I whispered to the mirror. You'll wish I was broke. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not a gentle smile, not a kind one. It was the smile of a man who had been underestimated for far too long. I picked up my phone again, scrolling back to Emily's message. My fingers hovered over the screen, tempted to respond, to fire back something sharp. But no, silence was louder. Silence would eat at her more than any words. Instead, I drafted a short text to Michael. Prepare a decoy will. Leave Daniel with nothing but debts. Make it believable. I didn't press send yet. Timing was everything. But as I stared at those unsent words, I knew. The game had begun. I stared at the words on my phone for a long time. Prepare a decoy will. Leave Daniel with nothing but debts. Make it believable. The sentence pulsed like a secret heartbeat in my hand. For years, I had built my empire in silence. Now, I was about to weaponize that silence. I finally pressed send. The reply came minutes later, sharp and cautious. Richard, this is drastic. Are you sure? I smiled faintly, sliding my glasses higher on my nose. Drastic, he called it. He didn't know what humiliation felt like in front of 300 people. He didn't know what it was to be stripped of dignity by your own son's laughter. I typed back, I'm sure. This is only the beginning. The following afternoon, Michael came to my study. He was always punctual, his leather briefcase bulging with papers that could build or destroy empires. You're serious about this, he said without preamble, setting the case down. His gray eyes scanned me, weighing whether grief or anger had unhinged me. Serious, I replied, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. I want Daniel and Emily to believe every word. I want them to taste the ashes of my failure long before they ever learn the truth. Michael hesitated, then opened the case and pulled out draft documents. This version of the will leaves the estate encumbered with supposed debts, loans, obligations. It paints a picture of mismanagement. Daniel inherits nothing but liability. Emily will think she married into a dying line. I ran my finger across the forged numbers and signatures. It was a masterpiece of deception. Perfect, I murmured. Let it sit somewhere Emily can find it. Michael raised a brow. You want her to discover it? Of course, I said. Greed has a way of guiding people straight into the traps you set. She won't be able to resist. That evening I played my part. When Daniel called, I let my voice sound tired, almost feeble. Dad, listen, he began, His tone clipped, impatient. Emily thinks maybe it's better if you don't come around too much. You understand, right? We're starting our life and... I cut him off gently, the way a weak man might. Of course, son. I wouldn't want to intrude. I know. I don't have much to offer anymore. Silence on the line. Then a sigh of relief from him. Good. I'm glad you understand. When the call ended, I sat there staring into the dark. The performance was convincing. They believed I was shrinking, fading, becoming irrelevant, exactly as I intended. A week later, Michael called. It's done. The decoy documents are secure. If she's digging, she'll find them. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. The hook was set. Now all I needed was patience. I imagined Emily's face when she stumbled upon those forged papers, her triumphant smirk fading into fury, her whispers dripping poison into Daniel's ear. She would believe she had uncovered my secret, and Daniel, blinded by her manipulations, would swallow every lie whole. I poured myself another drink, the amber liquid glowing under the study lamp. For the first time in years, I felt not broken, not humiliated, but powerful. They wanted a broke father, I whispered into the glass. I'll give them one. Just then, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Michael. It was Daniel. Emily says we don't owe you anything. Don't expect us to take care of you. I stared at the message, my hand tightening around the glass until it almost shattered. Good. The deeper they sank into arrogance, the sweeter the fall would be. Daniel's text still echoed in my head when I received their dinner invitation a week later. I almost laughed when I read Emily's carefully worded message. It would mean a lot if you joined us for dinner. Daniel wants you there. Daniel wanted me there? No. This had Emily's fingerprints all over it. Perhaps she thought inviting me back into their home would make her appear gracious. Or maybe she simply wanted to see how far my poverty had broken me. Either way, I accepted without hesitation. That night, I walked into their new home. Modern, sprawling, the kind of suburban palace Emily loved to flaunt. Every corner screamed money. Crystal vases, polished marble counters, a chandelier that seemed intentionally larger than mine. Emily greeted me with a rehearsed smile. Richard, we're so glad you came. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes scanned me the way a predator studies prey. Daniel, standing behind her, looked less like a son welcoming his father and more like a man tolerating an inconvenience. Dinner was staged to impress. Lobster tails, vintage wine, gold-rimmed china. I sat at the table and watched Emily pour herself into the role of perfect hostess. She laughed a little too loudly, touched Daniel's arm a little too often, and made sure her glittering ring caught the light with every gesture. But I saw the cracks. Daniel was drinking more than eating. His laughter felt forced, brittle. Emily's charm was for me, not him. She wanted me to see what she thought I had lost. Halfway through the meal, she raised her glass. To family, she said, her smile thin and deliberate. Even when times are difficult, family is what binds us. The jab was subtle, but it landed. My difficult times, her polite way of calling me, broke. The table chuckled politely. I picked up my glass slowly, swirling the wine as if studying it. Then I stood, every eye shifting to me. To Famil. I began, my tone calm, almost gentle. But not just the word. Family in its true form. Loyalty, respect, honor. Emily tilted her head, her smile flickering. Daniel looked down at his plate. I continued, letting my voice drop just enough to sharpen the edges. It's easy to raise a glass when life is comfortable. The true measure of family is how they act when they believe you have nothing left to give. The silence around the table grew thick. Emily's hand tightened on her glass, her knuckles whitening. Daniel's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. I smiled faintly, raising my glass higher. Here's to truth, the kind that always finds its way to the surface. I drank, slow and deliberate. When I set the glass down, Emily leaned toward Daniel and whispered something I couldn't catch, but I didn't need to. I saw it in her eyes. Suspicion. She knew. She sensed there was more beneath my words. And greed, that relentless hunger inside her, would not let her rest until she uncovered it. I sat back, content. The bait had been cast. The way Emily's smile had faltered during my toast was burned into my memory. She hadn't expected me to speak like that. Calm, cryptic, dangerous. She thought she'd broken me at the wedding. But now, she sensed I was holding something back. And greed, once awakened, never sleeps. 2 days later, she called me. Not Daniel, Emily. Her voice was sugar-dipped poison. "Richard," she said, pausing just long enough to sound hesitant. "I was thinking about what you said at dinner. About truth. You sounded deeper than usual. Is everything okay?" I almost laughed. She wanted me to crack, but I played along. "Life is fine, Emily. I've learned the value of silence. It makes people reveal themselves." There was a faint inhale on the other end, and then her mask slipped. Silence or secrets? Bullseye. She was fishing. Later that week, she arrived uninvited at my home. Dressed perfectly as always, hair pinned, designer purse slung over her arm. She looked around my modest living room with thinly veiled contempt, as if even the air here wasn't worthy of her lungs. "I was in the neighborhood," she lied, setting her purse down carefully, "and thought I'd check on you. Daniel worries, you know." Daniel hadn't worried about me in months. This was all her. I offered her coffee, watching as she sat rigidly on the sofa, her eyes darting around, searching for evidence. She was waiting for me to slip. An envelope, a bank statement, anything that betrayed my supposed poverty. "So, Richard," she began smoothly, stirring sugar into her cup, though she hadn't even sipped it yet. "What have you been doing since retiring? Must feel strange, not having the same resources." Her words were bait, but I smiled. Strange? No. Liberating. Her hand froze mid-stir. That one word, liberating, made her tilt her head. To Emily, money was chains she loved wearing. The idea that I could be free unnerved her. The conversation shifted, subtle at first, then sharper. She leaned forward. "Richard, forgive me if I'm blunt, but you seemed confident at dinner, almost as if you were holding something back. You're not hiding debts, are you?" I let a small laugh escape. "Debts? No, Emily. I pay mine in full. Always." She didn't like that answer. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but her eyes gleamed. That gleam told me she had made it her mission to uncover my truth. When she finally left, her perfume lingered in the air, but so did her intent. That night, I watched from the upstairs window as a car idled across the street. A black sedan, tinted windows. Emily's paranoia had already escalated to surveillance. She wasn't going to wait for Daniel to question me. She wanted the answers herself, and greed was pushing her further than she realized. What she didn't know was that I wanted her to look. I wanted her to circle closer and closer until the trap snapped shut. As I closed the curtains, a thought flickered in my mind. If she digs deep enough, she might just find exactly what I've hidden for her. And when she does, it will ruin them both. I had always imagined that no matter how manipulative Emily became, my son would see through her. I believed blood would be thicker than the poison she whispered in his ear. But I was wrong. It started subtly. Shorter phone calls, excuses about being busy, weeks passing without a visit. When I finally reached him, his voice no longer carried warmth. It was clipped, transactional. One evening, I decided to visit him myself. He opened the door, his smile forced, his eyes darting toward the hallway behind him as if he didn't want me inside. "Dad," he said, his tone flat. "This isn't a good time." I tilted my head. "Not a good time to see your father?" He sighed. "It's not that. She's just stressed. We've got so much going on right now." I stepped inside anyway. The living room smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume, Emily's scent. The house had grown even more lavish since the wedding, like money itself was trying to prove their worth. Daniel followed me in, his posture stiff. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he finally broke the silence. "Dad, I need to ask, are you okay financially?" There it was, Emily's seed sprouting in his words. I chuckled softly. "Why would you ask that?" He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "It's just, you haven't exactly been open. Emily thinks maybe you're struggling, that maybe you're hiding something." I stared at him, the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. "Is that what you think too? That I'm a liar?" His silence was louder than any answer. In that moment I realized Emily had gotten to him completely. She had poisoned him with doubts, with whispers about my silence, with questions about my so-called poverty. "Daniel," I said quietly, "when you were a boy, you once told me you'd never let anyone come between us. Do you remember that?" His jaw tightened. "People change, Dad." See 3 words carved deeper than any knife. I left shortly after, my footsteps echoing in the grand hallway. As I walked out the door, I caught sight of Emily standing at the top of the staircase, arms folded, lips curved in a satisfied smirk. She hadn't said a word, but she didn't need to. She had won, for now. Back in my car, I sat in the dark driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel. My own son had turned cold, his love iced over by greed and suspicion. But instead of breaking me, it solidified my resolve. If Daniel believed I was hiding something, then perhaps it was time to let him find it. The trap needed bait, and I already knew exactly where to place it. The house felt colder after that night with Daniel. It wasn't the draft slipping through the old windows, it was the emptiness. My son's voice still echoed in my mind, clipped and distant. "People change, Dad." Yes, people changed. Daniel had changed. But Emily hadn't changed. She'd merely revealed herself for what she truly was. Greed in designer heels. That week, the silence of my home became unbearable. I spent my evenings pacing through the library, pulling open old ledgers, revisiting accounts, remembering a time when Daniel's laughter filled these halls. The storm inside me was building. Anger, grief, betrayal, all clashing like thunder waiting to break. And outside, a real storm was forming too. Heavy clouds pressed against the sky, winds beginning to rattle the trees. It was as if nature itself mirrored my turmoil. Late one evening, as the rain began to hammer against the windows, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe he was reaching out. Maybe the boy I raised was still in there. But his words extinguished that hope. "Dad, Emily and I want to help, but you have to be honest with us. If you're struggling, tell us. We could sell some things, even move some money around, but we can't help if you keep secrets." Help me? The irony was bitter. My own son, who had called me broke in front of hundreds, now offered charity, under Emily's watchful shadow. I spoke carefully. "Daniel, storms pass. Some truths reveal themselves only when the rain clears. Trust me when I say everything will be clear soon." There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. "Emily thinks you're hiding money. If that's true, and you're keeping it from us, don't expect us to forgive you." The line went dead. I stood there in the dim glow of the library lamp, the storm outside raging louder. My reflection in the rain-streaked glass looked older, harder. I knew then, there was no turning back. Emily had turned Daniel against me, and my son was too blind to see it. I closed the ledger in front of me, a thick, leather-bound book from years past. My fingers lingered on the spine. Within these pages lay the bait I had prepared, a financial trail I wanted Emily to discover. A storm was gathering, not just in the sky, but in this family. And when it broke, it would wash away everything they thought they owned. Lightning cracked outside, illuminating the room in stark white. I whispered to myself, "If you were in my place, what would you do? Forgive them? Or let the storm drown them?" I already knew my answer. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained. Outside, the world looked washed clean. Inside, my resolve had hardened into steel. It was time to take the next step. I called my attorney, Mr. Caldwell, a man who had been with me for decades. His voice on the phone was calm, but curious. "You're sure about this, Richard? You want a formal reading? Now?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Invite Daniel. Invite Emily. Let them hear it. Every word." 2 days later, we gathered in Caldwell's oak-paneled office. The room smelled of polished wood and aged leather, the kind of place that demanded silence. Daniel sat across from me, avoiding my eyes, his hands clenched in his lap. Emily, by contrast, leaned forward in her seat, alert, hungry, her diamond earrings catching the morning light like tiny daggers. Caldwell adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "We are here to review the provisions of Richard Lawson's will. Some of these details may come as a surprise." Emily's smile spread, the corners of her mouth twitching with anticipation. I could almost hear her thoughts. Finally, proof. The fortune he's been hiding. I sat back, letting the scene unfold. Caldwell began reading aloud, his voice measured and deliberate. "To my son, Daniel Lawson, I leave a choice. He may accept the inheritance as outlined, or he may reject it entirely. But once that choice is made, it is binding." Daniel frowned. "A choice?" Emily's hand shot to his arm. "Keep listening," she whispered. Caldwell continued. "If he accepts, he will inherit certain assets, properties, accounts, and holdings. However, these come with conditions: loyalty, responsibility, and respect for family." Emily shifted uncomfortably, her eyes narrowing. Conditions weren't what she wanted. She wanted numbers. Daniel looked confused. "Conditions? What does that even mean?" Caldwell turned a page. "If he rejects, everything revered is to charity foundations under Richard Lawson's name." Emily's breath caught. For the first time, her mask cracked. I spoke then, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "Money without loyalty is poison. Daniel, you once called me broke. If that's how you see me, then perhaps it's better you see nothing at all." Daniel's face flushed red. "Dad, I didn't—" Emily cut him off, her voice sharp and urgent. "Daniel, don't listen to this manipulation. He's playing games. Take the deal. Accept it before he changes his mind." Caldwell raised a hand. "Emily, please. This is a legal proceeding. Your husband must decide for himself." Silence fell. The air in the room grew heavy. Daniel looked torn, sweat forming at his temples. Emily's nails dug into his arm as if she could force the decision out of him. Then Caldwell read the final line. "One sealed ledger remains to be opened only if Daniel accepts. Its contents will determine the true nature of this inheritance. Emily's eyes lit up with a feverish glow. The ledger, the bait I had dangled, was now in plain sight, gleaming like gold to her greedy heart. I leaned forward slightly, letting my gaze pierce through both of them. This is your storm now, Daniel. Choose wisely. Once you do, there is no turning back. The room fell into silence so sharp it felt like glass. Daniel's chest rose and fell, his lips parting, his eyes darting between Emily and me, and then he opened his mouth to speak. Daniel's lips parted, but the words wouldn't come. I could see the battle raging inside him, son against husband, blood against whispers. Emily's hand gripped his arm like a vice, her nails digging crescent moons into his skin. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, trembling, but firm. I'll accept. Emily exhaled sharply, relief and triumph mingling in her eyes. To her, it was a victory. To me, it was the first step into the snare. Mr. Caldwell nodded gravely. Very well. As outlined in the will, since Daniel accepts the inheritance, the sealed ledger will now be revealed. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a thick, leather-bound book, the same one I had spent nights preparing. Its edges were worn, its weight undeniable. Emily's gaze latched onto it with the hunger of a starving animal. Daniel swallowed hard. What's in it? I leaned forward. The truth. Caldwell opened the ledger slowly, each page whispering against the other like secrets spilling out. He began to read aloud. To my son, wealth is more than numbers. It is trust. It is legacy. The accounts you see here are real, properties, stocks, holdings worth more than you can imagine. But with them comes a test. Loyalty will decide whether this fortune is yours or whether it vanishes into the hands of those who deserve it more. Emily's face flushed red, her eyes darting frantically over the figures. She gasped when Caldwell read a line about a hidden trust fund. Her lips trembled as though she were holding back a scream. Daniel leaned closer, his voice hoarse. This is real? Yes, I said quietly. But the inheritance isn't just money, it's the weight of choices. The fortune is yours, if you prove worthy of it. Emily snapped then. Her mask shattered, her voice sharp and venomous. Enough with these games. He said he accepts, so give us the money, Richard. Don't twist it with riddles and auditions. You think loyalty pays the bills? Respect buys nothing. Daniel flinched at her words, but she didn't stop. She was too far gone, her greed consuming her like fire devouring dry wood. I met her gaze, unblinking. That's the difference between you and me, Emily. To you, wealth is only paper and stone. To me, it's character. And that is the real inheritance. The room fell into a tense silence. I could see Daniel trembling, torn between his father's words and his wife's fury. Caldwell closed the ledger with a heavy thud. The decision has been made. The inheritance is now bound by its conditions. If Daniel fails them, everything reverts to the foundations Mr. Lawson has designated. Emily's mouth opened, then snapped shut. Rage flickered in her eyes. I knew in that instant this wasn't over. She wouldn't let go. She would claw, scheme, and manipulate until she got what she thought was hers. And that was exactly what I wanted. As we left the office, I looked back at Daniel. His face was pale, haunted. He didn't know yet, but the real storm hadn't even begun. The fortune was his to lose, and Emily would make sure he did. Daniel's footsteps echoed down the marble hallway, heavy, uneven. His shoulders sagged beneath the invisible weight of a fortune that no longer felt like a blessing. Beside him, Emily whispered furiously, her words a blade at his ribs. You heard him, Daniel. All of it, stocks, houses, trust funds. You just need to prove yourself. Don't let him trick you into giving it up. He rubbed his temples, exhaustion written across his face. It's not that simple, Emily. Father's made it clear this isn't just money. It's a test. She scoffed, her voice dripping with venom. A test? He's manipulating you. He always has. He wants to keep control even from the grave. Don't you see? This is our chance. My chance. Her words cut deeper than any knife. I watched them from the library door, my chest tightening. Daniel, the boy who once clutched my hand when storms rattled the windows, was slipping further into her shadow. I stepped forward. Daniel. He turned, startled, shame flickering in his eyes. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw my son, the boy I had raised. But Emily's hand clamped around his arm, dragging him back into her orbit. You're making a mistake, I said quietly. This inheritance, it's already consuming you. Emily laughed, sharp and cruel. Spare us your lectures, Richard. The ink isn't even dry on your so-called conditions, and already he's the heir. Your empire belongs to us now. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he didn't contradict her. That silence said everything. The storm outside rattled the windows, thunder rolling like judgment. Fitting, I thought. For storms don't just break, they cleanse. Do you remember, Daniel? I said, my voice steady despite the crack in my heart. What I used to tell you? That greed burns everything it touches. You thought wealth was power, but you'll see now. Sometimes inheritance is only ashes. Emily sneered. Ashes? Don't be melodram. Attic! We're not walking away empty-handed. You'll see us live better than you ever dreamed. But fate has its own ledger. The very next day, the cracks began. The business partners Daniel tried to approach turned cold. The trust clauses denied him authority. The properties Emily tried to boast about? Locked, under conditions he couldn't fulfill. The accounts? Frozen. And slowly, like sand slipping through clenched fists, the empire crumbled in their hands. I watched from the sidelines, my heart torn between sorrow and justice. Daniel's face grew hollow, his eyes dark with regret he couldn't voice. Emily screamed, raged, accused, but no fury could conjure wealth from loyalty they never earned. One evening, Daniel stumbled into my study. His clothes hung loose on him, his voice a whisper of the man he once was. Father, His words caught. His lips trembled. I've lost everything. I closed the ledger before me. No, Daniel. You didn't lose it. You burned it. With every choice, every silence, every time you let her speak for you. You fed the fire. And now, all that remains is ash. Tears welled in his eyes. For a moment, Emily wasn't there to shield him, and I saw my son again. Broken. Small. Reaching for something he'd never grasp again. I just wanted to make you proud, he whispered. My throat tightened, but I forced steel into my voice. Pride isn't bought, Daniel. It's earned. And you sold it long ago. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then Emily appeared in the doorway, her eyes blazing. Don't listen to him. We'll rebuild, Daniel. We don't need his crumbs. We'll rise from this. But even Daniel's shoulders slumped further, her words ashes before they left her lips. He knew, as I knew, that their empire of greed had already turned to dust. I turned away, my decision sealed. Whatever bond remained between us had burned with the fortune. He was no Litiet Saasu, Onger my heir. He was only a son in ashes,